Hello everyone, this video is about chapter 34, lesson 4, fertilization and development on pages 995 to 998 in your textbook. For our objective, we're only going to describe fertilization and the early stages of development. So is there anything more remarkable than the formation of a new human being from a single cell? How do these cells arrange themselves into the tissues and organs of the body? And how does an individual cell know to become an embryonic skin, a heart, and a blood cell? These are some of the most important questions in all of biology, and we have only beginning to learn the answers. So what takes place during fertilization and the early stages of human development are what we're going to discuss, or I'm going to discuss in this video. So sperm and egg must meet so that the two gametes can fuse to form a single cell. And this fusion of sperm cell and egg is called fertilization. So the key events in early development includes gastrulation, which produces the three layers or three cell layers of the embryo, the neurulation, which leads to the formation of the nervous system. We're going to discuss each of these gastrulation and neurulation later or in the next slides. So the sperm swim actively through the uterus into the fallopian tubes. If an egg is present in one of the fallopian tubes, its chances of being fertilized are good. So if you're going to look at the figure, the first for the number 1 stage is the ovulation process wherein the ovum is released into the fibroae, moving to the fallopian tube. Then here the fertilization may occur. Here number 2 part here, wherein the sperm could meet where the egg could meet the sperm. So the egg is surrounded by a protective layer that contains binding sites to which the sperm can catch. The sperm head releases powerful enzymes that break down the protective layer of the egg. So the haploid and sperm nucleus enters the haploid egg. The chromosomes from sperm and egg are brought together to form a single diploid, or 2N, nucleus containing a set of chromosomes from each parent cell. So the fertilized egg now is called the zygote. So at this point, the developing human can also be called an embryo. So the developing embryos could be multiple, so not just one. If two eggs are released during the same menstrual cycle, so that could be in both sides of the fallopian tubes, and each is fertilized, so fraternal twins may result. Fraternal twins are not identical in appearance and may even be different sexes because each has been formed by the fusion of different sperm and different egg cell. So if you're going to look at the figure here, on the side there are two, on the right side, different multiple embryos may result. It could be fraternal twins, identical twins, and semi-identical twins. So moving on, sometimes a single zygote splits apart and produces two genetically identical embryos. And these two identical embryos are called, of course, identical twins. So this may be of the same sexes, either both males or both females, because they result from the same fertilized egg, so identical twins are always the same sexes. So if you're going to look at the figure on the side, fraternal twins splits into two, or have, two egg cells have been fertilized by each sperms. Then in identical twins, you have one egg cell has been fertilized by the sperm, but then it splits during the developmental stage and during the zygote stage, and then it may form into two developing embryos. And the semi-identical twins, in which two sperms have developed or have fertilized one egg cell and split during the zygote stage as well. So while still in the fallopian tube, the zygote begins to undergo mitosis. So as embryos grow, a cavity forms in the center until the embryo becomes a hollow ball of cells known as a blastocyst. So this is the next stage after zygote has been formed, further into two cells and furthermore into morula and then the blastocysts. So about 6 or 7 days after fertilization, the blastocyst attaches to the wall of the uterus and begins to grow into the tissues of the mother. If you're going to look at number 8 figure and at the bottom, this process is known as implantation. So after implantation, cells in the blastocyst begin to specialize or differentiate, resulting in the development of the various types of tissues in the body. So the body of the embryo will develop from these cells, while other cells of the blastocyst will differentiate into some of the tissues that supports and protect the embryo. So a cluster of cells known as the inner mast cells develops within the inner cavity of the blastocyst. So after the implantation, the three cell layers have been formed, and this is the result of the process gastrulation. So the three cell layers are called ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. So if we're going to look at the figure at the bottom, so the ectoderm and endoderm form first here at the middle. Then the mesoderm is produced by a process of cell migration shown in the figure. So from the cells here in the amniotic cavity, they tend to migrate into the pit here in the middle to form the mesoderm. So now we have the three layers: ecto, meso, and endoderms. The ectoderm were developed into skin and the nervous system, while the mesoderm cells differentiate and form many of the body's internal structure, including the bones, the muscles, blood cells, and the gonads, while the endoderm forms the linings of organs in the digestive system, such as the stomach, intestines, as well as in the respiratory and excretory systems. I've mentioned that the nervous system has been developed, and this is through the process of neurulation, which is the first step in the development of the nervous system. Shortly after gastrulation is complete, a block of mesodermal tissue begins to differentiate into the notochord. So you have already know what are notochords. This is the early support system of the growing embryo, and later on it will develop into the backbone of the vertebrates. So as notochord develops, the ectoderm near the notochord thickens and forms the neural plate. So the raised edges of the neural plate form the neural folds and then the neural crests. The neural folds gradually move together and form a neural tube from which the spinal cord and brain will develop. So basically, neurulation is just the formation of the neural tube from the foldings of the neural plates, and then a crust is formed, and then the tube or the notochord has been developed. Now the placenta. So the embryo is surrounded by the amnion, a sac filled with, this is the amnion at the figure, okay, a sac filled with amniotic fluid that surrounds the baby, or the growing embryo rather, that cushions and protects the developing embryo. Another sac known as the chorion, this is the enlarged part. So the chorion makes direct contact with the tissues of the uterus here. If we're going to look at the marker, the pointer, okay. So near the end of the third week of development, small finger-like projections called the chorionic villi form on the outer surface of the chorion, extend into the uterine lining. So this is the enlarged picture of the chorion, in which it has grown finger-like projections we call as chorionic villi. The chorionic villi and the uterine lining form a vital organ called the placenta. So this is where the placenta is found. The placenta is the connection between the mother and the embryo that acts as the embryo's organ of respiration, nourishment, and excretion. So the blood of the mother and of the embryo flow past each other. So to say they do not mix. The exchange of gases and other substances occurs in the chorionic villi. The umbilical cord, which contains two arteries and one vein, connects the embryo to the placenta. So if we're going to look at here, this is the enlarged picture of the umbilical cord, where you can see there are two arteries. So one, two here, and then it is wrapped around, and the umbilical vein is wrapped around the umbilical arteries. So after 8 weeks of development, the embryo is now called a fetus. So in the picture is an example of a real fetus inside the amniotic sac. So by the end of 3 months, most of the major organs and tissues are fully formed. The muscular system is well developed. The fetus may begin to move and show signs of reflexes. The fetus is about 8 meters or 8 centimeters rather long and has a mass of about 28 grams. So let's now summarize the lesson. In fertilization and early development, fertilization is the joining of a sperm and an egg. Following fertilization, a series of events called development begins. A fertilized egg is called a zygote. The zygote divides and undergoes repeated rounds of mitosis and develops into a hollow ball of cells called a blastocyst. About a week after fertilization, the blastocyst attaches to the wall of the uterus in the process of implantation. At the same time, cells of the blastocyst start to specialize through differentiation. Some cells migrate to form two cell layers, the ectoderm and the endoderm. During neurulation, the notochord and the neural tube form. The neural tube eventually develops into the brain and spinal cord. As the embryo develops, membranes for protection and nourishment also form. Part of one membrane combines with the uterine lining to form the placenta. Mother and embryo or fetus exchange gases, food, and waste products across the placenta. After 8 weeks of development, the embryo is called a fetus. By the end of 3 months, most organs are fully formed. So let's have some lesson check questions. Describe the process of fertilization. So fertilization occurs when a sperm enters an egg and the two haploid nuclei fuse, forming a single diploid nucleus. Number 2 question. What is the role of the placenta? So the placenta is a connection between the mother and the embryo and acts as your embryo's organ of respiration, nourishment, and excretion. So that's it for the lesson in fertilization and development. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.